Hey everybody, it's Austin Solomon, the Solomon Group Coldwell Banker, coming to you live with the Real Wausau Real Estate Show. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. Today we're talking about home inspections. What do you need to know about them? How does it fit into the process of buying and selling a house? We're going to cover all that and more today. We're going to do a deep dive right into home inspections. So looking forward to debunking some of the myths and just talking about this topic. So, so if you're a buyer, you're looking for a house. If you're selling a home, a lot of times you're going to encounter a home inspection. And what that is a home inspection is really an analysis of the home's condition. A home inspector is hired by the buyer to inspect for safety hazards or items that are not functional or could be problematic now or in the future. Structural soundness, and much more. So really the inspector is going to be checking out like all the outlets. They're going to run the faucets, make sure that there's no leaks, and inspect the attic, the roof, your mechanicals like your furnace and water heater. They're going to do basically the best they can to create an analysis and a report of the condition of the home. Yeah, so how does this fit into the process of buying or selling? Well, as a buyer, you have a home inspection contingency, and a contingency, again, is basically a condition that has to be met in order to move forward with the purchase. And so a home inspection contingency is you want to make sure the house is in a suitable condition before you purchase it. As a buyer, you are responsible for paying for the home inspector, unless otherwise negotiated, but most of the time the buyer would pay to have that done. And the home inspector will go to the house. They'll probably spend 2 to 5 hours at the house depending on the size, and they're going to be documenting the condition of the home and the age of the mechanicals and as much as they can get, and they're going to prepare a report for you. And then with that report, if there's items that come up, we could ask, the buyer and their agent could ask the seller to make corrections. Now, the seller doesn't have to make any corrections to the house. They're not required to. However, if there's some issues that come up that are major problems and the seller doesn't want to fix them, then the buyer could back out. And how that would look is it's in the form of basically you would give a notice to the seller saying, hey, here's the things that we're concerned about. If you don't fix it, then we're backing out. That would be called what we call a notice of defects. But in between that time frame, again, you have a certain amount of time, typically like 15 to 18 days to conduct a home inspection. And before that deadline comes up, you would have the opportunity to try to amend the offer to make things, to address any concerns or problems. So if it's inspection day, like what do you expect as a buyer? One of the things we recommend, and what's nice, is you can actually go to a summary of the home inspection with the inspector. So the inspector might be there for 3 hours, and in the last half hour, you can join the inspector there at the house where they can point out some of their findings. They can kind of go through the summary report. It's really valuable because you can learn a lot about the house. Maybe not even like some of the defects or problems that it has, but just some of the essential information to know as a homeowner, which is super valuable. Like where is the shut off? Like how do things work? What light switches power what areas? All those different things that the inspector found, they can kind of summarize for you in that last 30 minutes. Very, very beneficial. So how does negotiations work? Again, the seller's not required to fix anything. The buyer can propose that the seller fixes certain items, and it kind of sometimes goes back and forth. One of the myths of a home inspection is that the seller has to fix items from the home inspection, and they really don't. They don't have to do anything. Sometimes even agents get this mixed up where a seller is not required to do anything from a home inspection. Obviously it's sometimes it's in the seller's best interest to address some of those items, and that's where a good agent can help them decide, well, which things should we address, which things should we not. And that's kind of where it's helpful for that relationship to be formed between, in this case, the agent and the seller, where the seller can trust them to say, hey, what things are realistically going to need to be fixed from this list, so that even if things don't work out with this buyer moving forward, we can, these don't become an issue in the future. So again, things kind of go back and forth. The seller's not required to fix anything, but it's in the best interest for everybody to be level-headed in the negotiations, and for there to be some compromise. The buyer's going to have to do some things on their own. Seller should probably do some of the bigger things, and just kind of work together to get that negotiated. Another myth is we hear, well, this home won't pass a home inspection. Really, a home inspection is not a pass kind of fail kind of thing. And most of the time, the inspector is going to find something. It's very uncommon that a home inspector doesn't find at least probably actually 10 things that they would note on their home inspection. So you're paying them probably anywhere from $300 to $400 plus to inspect the property. They're going to find something to note. So it's not really like a pass or fail. Another myth is that the bank requires a home inspection. That's not the case. I think there's only been maybe once where a bank with a special loan type had actually required a home inspection. And so that's another thing too, is remember the bank is going to, obviously the bank wants to make sure the house is in a decent shape and it's worth at least what you're paying for it. That's why they send that appraiser out to assign a value to make sure that the home is worth what you're paying. And the appraiser is going to be the one who does a basic inspection to make sure there's nothing majorly wrong with the house. But a lot of times the bank won't see the home inspection. That brings me to another myth too, is who sees the home inspection. Sometimes buyers think that the city or municipality that the house is in will see the home inspection, and that's not necessarily the case. It's really between the buyer and the seller and the agents, and the inspector will be involved. But that inspection report is really confidential to those parties. It's not something that gets broadcasted to the, municipal, inspector, or there's really no, inspection police that says, hey, we have to, if there's items that come up from a home inspection that they have to be fixed for the municipality. And that's not to say that there might be some things that if the municipality found out that they would probably, request to be done. But there's no it's not like that report gets submitted. So, okay, a couple other things. So tips to buyers, obviously as like a first-time home buyer, or even if you've bought a lot of houses, we always recommend that you get the home inspected. There are cases where if you're an investor, you really are familiar with construction, or if you're buying a property and are trying to really get a good deal on it, maybe taking the house as is, not doing a home inspection isn't a bad idea. But in most cases, we always recommend a home inspection. So here's some tips for buyers. Number one is schedule your home inspection right away. Obviously, so you have this window to do the home inspection. And again, if there's issues that come up, you want time to be able to negotiate. And a lot of times, if a home inspector is going to pick out some general, if they see a concern, they might not know the full extent of what's going on. A home inspector kind of knows a lot, and a lot about like the house, but they're not specialists in each area. So, for example, like if an inspector says, hey, this furnace just doesn't quite seem right to me, something doesn't seem right with the how the furnace is functioning, at that point it'd be great to have a follow-up inspection where you could have like a HVAC contractor come in and really, because they're going to know what's going on with that furnace, and that's where a follow-up inspection can be very valuable. And if you schedule your home inspection right away, you have time to do that. If you don't, it gets a little bit more tricky. So that's the second tip too, is don't be afraid to have a follow-up inspection. If there's something on the report that the inspector doesn't really know, that's where it's great to have a contractor or have someone that's qualified to come out and really look at it. Because a lot of times what we found is that, that person is able to, that specialist is able to really hammer down on a fix. And a lot of times it's less of a problem, or sometimes it's even more of a problem than what the inspector had thought. Tip number 3 is go to that inspection summary. Again, 30 minutes where you learn a lot about the house. You can really get a good idea of what issues are there. And then you can gauge from the home inspector, like, hey, what's the magnitude of this problem? Is it something that I should really be worried about? Or is it something that, hey, I can address in the next year or two? So, going to that summary is very valuable. And then number 4 as a buyer is have the proper expectation. No house is perfect. Really what you're looking for is you're not looking for the expectation is you're not going to be looking for a perfect home inspection, because it's just not going to happen most of the time. You really want to make sure there's nothing majorly wrong with the house that's going to like put you under when you move in or be a immediate concern. But a lot of times you got to have that proper expectation. The sellers are not going to fix every little item on the home inspection. And a lot of those things that the inspector points out are really just for you to know, like they're for your knowledge, but not necessarily something that you need to negotiate. So yeah, just having those proper expectations. Now, as a seller, what's a tip too? Number one is have the proper expectation. You might have lived in a house for 10 years and you might think that, hey, I've never had any problems here. There's no issues. There's likely going to be some things that come up in the home inspection. A lot of people don't like their house to be criticized, which is very understandable, but have the expectation that, hey, they're likely going to find some stuff. Even though I've never had any problems here, I'm probably going to end up doing some kind of repairs. But then again, that's when you work with your agent to figure out, okay, what's reasonable? What's reasonable here? What should we do? What things should we leave for the buyer to do? And then second tip as a seller is you can do some work to prepare for a home inspection as well. And this is probably going to be a separate episode in and of itself. But basically, if you're walking around your house and you notice that, hey, maybe these outlets are missing a cover and looks like this could use some caulk around the toilet or the tub, or hey, there's some chipped paint around my windows. Just those little maintenance items that you can sometimes minimize what that inspection report looks like as far as the issues. And even if a lot of those maintenance items are taken care of, it can sometimes help the buyer just it's a little less overwhelming for a buyer when there's fewer items that come up. So all right, there's the podcast. Thanks for tuning into this week's episode, and appreciate you guys. If you like the podcast, if you find it valuable, let me know. Give us a review on your favorite platform, and looking forward to doing more shows.